if you don't have a use case for any of these vehicles, financially it's hard to justify because you're going to bump into things that don't financially make sense when it comes to fixing it if you can't do it yourself. That is, I think, the difference between the casual car person, the COVID car person, and the enthusiast. I don't recommend you drive it every day. There's no quicker way to make you hate something that you thought you liked than to drive it every day and feel every little bump and recognize and pick up on every little thing that is either potentially wrong with it or going wrong with it. The mechanical wear and tear you feel when driving a lifted all-wheel drive vehicle with 3 diffs, airbags, a supercharger, and all types of other electronic dash things is overwhelming if you are sensitive to those type of things, and this one has all of it. Howdy, Addicted Motors YouTube channel. My name is Troy. Today we're going to talk about, well, Land Rovers. Now, if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe. I've got thousands of videos on all different makes and models of all types of vehicles, reviews, off-roading, DIY, and pretty much anything you can think of. But a lot of my more popular videos and some things that I think people have given me some good feedback on is my take on buying these used Land Rovers. Now, I've purchased personally through our dealership and assisted others in buying dozens, maybe even hundreds to this point, I'm not even sure, old rusty turds like these you see in front of me. Again, 3 Rovers that you probably have not seen pictured together in one comparison, maybe? But we're going to talk about all 3 of them because when it comes to buying a used Land Rover, the first thing I ask people is, what's your use case and why do you want one? Because I think those are the 2 most important things that you need to know when making a decision or a purchase like this. So you've ended up here, it's probably because you have a broken Land Rover, you're searching for a broken Land Rover, you're looking for another broken Land Rover. One of the 3, it's usually how these things end up. So welcome to the channel. Now, the 3 cars I have before me is a 2010 L322.3, so it's a 5-liter non-supercharged L322, a 2002 Land Rover Freelander, spec, not really a whole lot of options, 2.5 kV engine, and a 1994 Land Rover Discovery D1 with a 5-speed manual, still 14 CUX. 3 wildly different vehicles, but 3 different use cases for your different type of person who I think is looking to buy a Rover, a used, problematic Land Rover that brings you lots of joy and friends. Let's talk, that's a big part of this. Now let's kind of get into a little bit of all of that. Now, most people in the Rover space have got here because their parents had them, people they know have them, they have friends like me who have convinced them that this is what they need in their life, or they just like to buy things that are cheap, or, last case, they don't like Toyotas and Hondas. I kind of fit in all 3 of those categories besides my parents owning one of these. I grew up around these vehicles, but I never really gave any thought into owning one until I realized that they were very cheap. When I started kind of buying and selling of things that I was going to keep forever. Again, my first 2 cars, after a lot of lengthy research, with a 100 Series Land Cruiser and an 05 Porsche Carrera. My first 2 real cars, right? I wanted the best of the best. But you can only have so much of the best besides you want something a little more grit to it. And that's how we end up here. And a lot of people end up here. And it's not a bad thing to end up here, but once you drive something with a little bit more character, then you're kind of sterilized Honda, Toyota, Land Cruiser, whatever you want to call it, Jeep, I don't know. We don't even talk about Jeeps really on this channel. These things really start to grow on you, and that's the problem. They're not worth a lot of money. They're plentiful, they made a lot of them, and usually they're broken. So let's kind of get into each of these 3 and, you know, what my thoughts and takes on them are. Now the D1. So mine's a little more heavily modified. I didn't buy it with all this on it. I ended up here, and usually most people say they're not going to end up there, but they end up there anyway. This is my version of ending up here. The D1 and the Range Rover Classic, there's one sitting over there. When someone says, hey, I am looking for my first project Land Rover, I'm kind of handy. I like to do some off-road type of adventure stuff, use it a little bit for my purpose, but like the classic boxy shape that I remember as a kid. My go-to is a D1. They are still cheap. Get them from $1,000 to $10,000. They came in a few engine variants in the US. You could get the 3.9 V8, or after the 1996, get the 4-liter also GEM's V8. Again, great motors, easy to work on. One, again, no OBD2, one at OBD2. They do rust. They don't really rust as terminally as some other vehicles. There's water intrusion that is an issue. There's head gases that are an issue, and just kind of general lack of maintenance, you know, because it is solid axles. You've got all these type of seals and diffs and clutches because this one's manual, and just a lot of deferred maintenance. Because the thing about Land Rovers is people complain about the reliability, but most of them have 150 to 200,000 miles on them and are 30 years old. Most vehicles in that condition will suffer from most of those same issues. Sometimes struggle unless you remember them back in the day, and I've purchased D1s that had records from the first year of ownership that said no starter, need a head gasket or something. So it's kind of bad-ish across the board, but this is where I would start if you're looking for something in that category. Now, I like a D1. Like I said, they're fairly easy to work on. There's a lot of support in the community about D1s as far as people that know how to fix them. The forums, most general shops, I mean, you're probably not gonna get the service of the dealer. I don't think they work on things that are over 10 years old, but there's a lot of independents that still have a lot of knowledge and information. You can still find all the parts and pieces at a junkyard and, you know, have the ability to do some of the things yourself, because that's the only way it's cost effective. You know, if you're gonna pay a shop $150 to $200 an hour to work on your $3,000 disco, then the numbers really don't add up and the enjoyment factor goes down. I try to, you know, emphasize the learning aspect of things to kind of keep the enjoyment factor up when you're owning and living with the Classic. So again, fairly sparse interior. This one does not have power seats, which I like. Most everything is functional. I've got a few issues going on right now. I've got my vehicle speed sensors not working correctly. You know, you've got a manual center locking diff. I have a Detroit rear locker in it. It has an annoying R385 speed, which I don't really enjoy driving that much, but it can be fun. There's room for 7. It is cool with the jump seat in the back. You can fit a car seat. I wouldn't say they're relatively safe, but they're pretty solidly built, if not rusted out. And they provide a pretty satisfactory overall kind of nostalgic classic experience. So points, points, points. So if you're like me, I would have clicked on this video just to hear someone talk about an old Freelander. Most likely because it is the forbidden fruit of the Land Rover world. You can't call yourself a Land Rover enthusiast if you haven't owned one of these and lived with it for a little while. So, you know, like taking things to the most enthusiastic level, you know, as you start reliable and you get worse and worse and worse and worse, then you're messing with old 50s and 60s French cars. This is kind of the internet has led me to believe, but this is my second one, and I haven't had any major issues. Maybe that's foreshadowing. This one is for sale. I've posted it. Hopefully it'll end up on Cars and Bids. It's a very nice example, I think. It's got 65,000 miles. It's rust-free. It runs and drives great, and everything works. But most of these cars, yes, most of them did blow up at some point. Lack of maintenance or engine design or ownership or maintenance schedules or whatever, what have you. They didn't survive and gain the kind of hard-nosed reputation as some of the other ones. But that being said, if it has survived this long, it's probably a pretty okay car. Like this one, 2 owners, 65,000 miles, pretty good condition, just need a little bit of updating, a little bit of love and care. And if you pay attention to it, like all these vehicles, that's a common theme here, it might not hurt you as bad as people say. And as far as that use case question go, right? I think at this point, it has a very kind of classic, nostalgic, early 2000s retro look. You know, it's got the roll down rear window. You could see it out with the surfboard in. They made it in an SE3 with 2 doors and a removable top. I bought one of those as well. That'll be on the channel soon. You know, all the plastic cladding, everything else inside. It's got a caramel interior, a cool early 2000s knob gauge cluster diag layout, and it's just kind of an interesting, fun, small, compact SUV. If you're running around town, you want something kind of cute, interesting, I think it's a discussion topic. It still wears the Land Rover badge and has a little bit of heritage. There was some type of Camelish trophy deal, a G4 edition, and some cool bits that you could buy and add on to it. And this is another one that can be found very inexpensively. Again, most of them probably have some serious issues. The KVV6 was not known for its legendary reliability stats with timing belt issues and head gasket issues, but I think that's a lot to do with the thermostat layout, intervals of maintenance, and a lot of other things that plague pretty much any old vehicle like you see here. But again, this is pretty cool, interesting car when you look at it. Again, I love the kind of launch gold color. It's got a gold matching skid plate. It has a real skid plate. It's got traction control, probably derived from the D2's kind of pretty advanced traction control for the day, so it can do kind of off-road things. It has 2 keys. It has a heated windshield, it has heated seats, got a little bit of a CD player, 4 windows, a window in the back that rolls down. Yeah, it's a neat little package. I could see this on the showroom floor, nostalgically, kind of next to a D2, an early L322, or an end of a P38, or the end of the run for the P38. So, is it a real Land Rover? It's old enough that I think it is. I think it's been grandfathered into that realm. It has a 3rd mounted spare on the back, just like a D1, which is pretty neat. And it's got a little bit of class to it. I could see this parked on the south of France with a surfboard hanging out of the back, probably with a diesel and a manual transmission. But it's a neat little runabout car. And if you're looking for something like that, you don't want to spend a whole lot of money. And let's say you have a D1, or you have an L322, or you have a Classic. Adding a Freelander to that kind of lineup, not really the worst idea, and it definitely give you something to talk about in your Land Rover group chat. And now the last one on our list, the forbidden fruit, the L322.3 Range Rover 5-liter non-supercharged or supercharged L322. The one I tell people not to buy. I've been living with this one for about a week now, and I'll tell you, it's nice. I can see why people like these more than, again, I say to buy an 08 or 09 .2 L322 supercharged with the 4.2 Jag engine or the 4.4 Jag engine, but the 5-liter, it's a sweetheart, right? It makes the same, if not more horsepower, or more direct, naturally aspirated horsepower than the supercharged 4.2, which gives the driving experience, makes just a little bit more normal, a little more light, takes off quicker, off the smoother. It's a little quieter. The inside is a little bit more refined, and it just kind of feels a little bit more like a real car. I can see why people fall for these when they don't understand the timing chain issues and all of that. Now, getting into the issues, right? I don't tell people that aren't familiar with this world to buy these. I still don't. But if you find one for, let's say it's 10 grand, with the timing chains done, and the crossover coolant pipes done, and maybe a new airbag or 2, you might be okay if it's like 10 grand or so. And it's not something I recommend for your parents or your new enthusiast friend, but you really gotta want it. And the guys that own these from an enthusiast standpoint, again, not as a daily driver, as I want an autobiography L322 5-liter supercharged Range Rover, they know what they're getting into. It's a very interesting club, and they're now cheaper almost than the equivalent .2, again 06 to 09 L322. So when something gets to a certain price point, it doesn't matter what the mechanical issues are, it becomes therefore attractive to potentially get into. But again, the L322 is definitely your best daily Rover, the one you live with. I don't recommend you drive it every day. There's no quicker way to make you hate something that you thought you liked than to drive it every day and feel every little bump and recognize and pick up on every little thing that is either potentially wrong with it or going wrong with it. The mechanical wear and tear you feel when driving a lifted all-wheel drive vehicle with 3 diffs, airbags, a supercharger, and all types of other electronic dash things is overwhelming if you are sensitive to those type of things, and this one has all of it. But if you find the right one and you're willing to spend some money, and if this is the thing you want at the end of the day, it's a nice thing to live with while you're living with it when it's not at the shop. And again, I say that with a grain of salt because people ask me for a lot of buying advice, and the use case is a big one, right? Can these go off-road and do things? Yes. Throw some knobby tires on it. My black L322 is in here with some decent tires and everything, rear locker. It goes anywhere, it's awesome. I'm not worried about scratching or anything. It's a little bit wider than a D1 or something that you don't mind bashing around off trails. So I encourage people to pick their use case and then pick the Rover, unless they just want something to drive around. Or the guy that has an issue with buying old junk and keeping it. I don't know who that guy is. But again, it's a little bit of the forbidden fruit. I think everyone's wife will like this one better. This is the one you keep at the lake house or the beach house or at the apartment downtown. It can still get you through the snow. And this is your project one. It does a little bit of everything. A nice one is nice to drive. It's really on personal preference. There's not one shoe that fits all. The L322 is kind of the jack of all trades, but so is the Disco. And again, if you don't want to feel the need or the temptation to do any type of excursions, then choose a Freelander. It's a tough one, right? And there's no real answer. It's not like, oh, this one's the best, that one's the best, that one's the worst. I mean, 5 liters, they're not great, but you get where I'm going with this. So hopefully I didn't ramble too much. I just happen to have these 3 here and thought it would be a good idea to kind of roll through, I guess, my thoughts on each of them. If you're interested in purchasing any of, well, not any of these, that one's not for sale. These 2 could be for sale, or a different one. I have access to all kinds of dealer auctions and networks, and I know people selling things. So shoot me an email, like, subscribe, follow me on Instagram or Facebook, and have a nice day. Catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.